So let's take a look at prompting inside of Comfy UI, and we're going to take a look at the basics here. So it's going to be prompting and workflows, and this is something which will be important for those guys who are relatively new to stable diffusion, the Comfy UI style. Now we've got the basic workspace here. If you create a prompt that you really like, you can go ahead and save it. And with the plugin that we've installed, you can go ahead and save it as a workflow as well. So choose your option. This one is the default one, and that should work all the time. I found that the plugin version which we've installed, sometimes it doesn't work quite as well as I would like. But let's go ahead and look at a feature that should be really good for folk who are coming over from Automatic 11.11. Now, when you work with Automatic 11.11, or in fact any other version of Stable Diffusion, there's a degree of similarity. So I can drag in a PNG from Automatic 11.11, and it brings in the entire workflow. And that's something which is really useful because we don't have to then recreate the entire thing from scratch. There are some caveats. For instance, we might not have the exact VAE or model. There may be differences in the setup between Comfy UI and Stable Diffusion, but that's something that you will know about depending on your own setup. The other thing is there are certain aspects of prompts that work well in Stable Diffusion that we don't really have any need for inside, that work well inside of Automatic 11.11, that we don't really have any need for inside of Comfy UI. Therefore, if I hit Q prompt on this one, we're not gonna get the exact same result. You can see it working away, moving through, upscaling the image. And we should see some sort of result coming up. Okay, that didn't quite work properly. We're supposed to see the weekend with something that looks like a rocket or a spaceship behind him. So what we can do when we work in this way is to go ahead and sort of do some troubleshooting. And when I get this type of result, what I'm looking at is probably the VAE. So the VAE may not be the ideal one. I'm going to change it to one of the ones we downloaded earlier. And what happens with this software is that it will take off from the last place before there was actually a change. So it started off from here because the change affected just this point onwards. Now the upscaling does take a bit of time, so we'll pause for a second. Okay, we've got something that makes a bit more sense now. We've got something that looks like the kind of results that I got inside of Automatic 11.11. So the process when you're bringing in images from Automatic 11.11 is that you need to make sure that everything lines up basically. First of all, you want to make sure that the models that you're using are the ones that are available inside of Comfy UI. If not, then bring them into Comfy UI or set things up so that you share the models with Automatic 11.11. As we've discussed before, you want to make sure you're using the right VAE. This is where things tend to go a little bit pear-shaped. And for this one, we've got the right size, 512 by 512, and then we've got the correct checkpoint. Now this checkpoint here is one you won't find anywhere because it's one that I created. It's possible to do that yourself so that you can create, you can merge checkpoints. That's something that's quite a useful thing to do. Now, parts of this prompt didn't work properly, and those parts of the prompt are the ones that are in the square brackets. Those just don't really translate to Comfy UI. So one of the things you have to do with Automatic 11.11 is to learn the techniques of Comfy UI and then apply the techniques of Comfy UI, because they, generally speaking, will give you either quicker results or better results, or you have less time to get to the results that you want. So the idea really is to learn Comfy UI and then to reinterpret the things inside of Automatic 11.11 that don't work. So here, quite a chunk of this particular prompt just doesn't work inside of Comfy UI. I need to figure out how to do the same thing using the resources that I've got inside of Comfy UI. I'm pretty sure that developers of Comfy UI could have included these features inside of Comfy UI if they needed to, but if there's no need to, then we won't see it there. And certainly with this kind of thing where we've got these square brackets doing fantastic stuff, my option would be to either go back into Automatic 11.11 and use this feature with the square brackets, which is a feature I really like inside of Automatic 11.11, or I could just develop a completely new technique for creating the image that I want. And normally it's going to work a lot faster inside of Comfy UI. Now that's something we covered in the first course in some detail, so I'm not going to repeat all of that, but this ability to drag in images from the other versions of Stable Diffusion is a really useful one if you don't want to recreate the entire workflow. The software just does it for you. Another thing we can do is if we go to Civit AI, oh God, this is a really nice one. And we've got here an image which is created using an SDXL workflow. Right, so we've got the SDXL workflow. It's using a checkpoint that I actually don't have right now. So we can actually try this. And if you were working inside of Automatic 11.11, you'd copy the data here. But here inside of Comfy UI, we copy the data here. So we've got the workflow. And if it says workflow, just copy there. That copies it. And it should be possible to do a Control V paste. Boom. And we've got the result there. So just paste it into the document, into the work area, and you should be able to run this particular image. Now we don't have the we know that we don't have the checkpoint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to the Dream Shaper Alpha checkpoint, which is the next best one that we've got. Obviously, when you're working through the course, you may want to download some of these checkpoints, and it's going to be up to your own sort of ability to curate them. But with me, I like to sort of wait until they're at least in alpha. I like to wait until they're completed and then download them for curation. But Dream Shaper is one that I've got. I'm using it because that's the latest one for Dream Shaper for Excel. Now we've got an SDXL workflow here. How do we know? Well, we've got SDXL checkpoints. That's one way of knowing this is an SDXL workflow. But other things might be a little bit different as well. The VAE, that has to change. So we can't use the old VAEs for 1.5. We've got to use the SDXL VAEs. And I think it's already picked that one up. And we could try to run this. Now I know that we don't have the actual checkpoint, but we should get something that looks fairly similar. And I think here they're using a special name for the refiner model. So with SDXL, you have two different models you're going to be using. You're going to use the base model and the refiner model. Let me find the refiner model for my setup, and hopefully we can get this running. The other thing I really need to do is to make sure that the VAE for the refiner model is actually the correct one, because it's not going to process correctly otherwise. And I can see here there's another drop down. Let's see what's happening there. Okay, that might not work because I think they may be using a feature that we don't actually have. But we can try to run this prompt and see what happens. And it will tell us if there's a problem. It will sort of stop and give an indication if something is not quite right. So that completed, and what we've got here is an image that looks quite different from the original image that we were looking at here. So that's actually a positive thing. It means that there's a difference, there's a significant difference between this particular checkpoint and the one that we used. So that's something which I currently use a little bit to check the differences between the SDXL checkpoints and the default SDXL base checkpoint. If there's not too much of a difference between them, I don't want to keep a 6 or 7 gigabyte checkpoint on my system unless it's giving me something different from the base checkpoint. So as you can see there, we've got a lot of resources that we can use either for people who are working with Automatic 11.11 or other versions of Stable Diffusion, and for people who have got the ability to go and surf around on Civit AI and check some of these new workflows. Now, this ability to copy the workflows and paste it is a really nice one because it means that you can actually get a head start in terms of understanding how other people are using the new software. And that's something I strongly encourage because it's easy to get caught up with this idea that there is a right way or a wrong way of doing things, whereas in actual fact there are many ways of doing things, and this software allows you to explore all these many ways of doing things. The settings that the individual has used here are not necessarily going to be the settings that I would use, and certainly the workflow, the entire workflow, is something that might be a little bit alien to me. You sort of have to get into the mind of the person who created the workflow. You kind of have to go through. When you hit the Q prompt, it will show you where it's actually moving from to. It will actually highlight the particular segment, the particular point or node that is actually working on. And you'll often pause for quite some time on the case samplers. These are the ones that basically do most of the sampling work. These are the ones that refer to the to the checkpoints and do most of the work in rendering the image. And typically what you'll find is that the workflow, you can kind of understand it just by looking at the, once you've completed this course, you'll certainly be able to understand, roughly speaking, what's happening by just looking at the way someone else has worked. But you really do have to sort of like put yourself in the mind of the person who designed the workflow and kind of figure out what were they trying to achieve. Sometimes you'll find certain things that are not available in your system, and you might have an idea, okay, maybe I need to get something similar to what they're using to achieve whatever result they got. So I find this a really nice way of getting inspiration. And once you're done working on a particular graph, you can go ahead and save it as a workflow and then use it in future, either for inspiration or to try to overcome some sort of limitation that you have in your own particular workflow. So for instance, this particular one here has got settings for the width and the height in the clip encoder, and these ones it's not obvious what you should put in there, but if you can see that someone's put in 496 in this particular area, this particular encoder, you could say, okay, well, that worked well for this particular prompt. Maybe I'll try that number in my own prompts. So you don't need to feel you just need to slavishly follow a particular technique or a particular workflow. There are lots and lots of workflows out there that you can experiment with and learn from. And again, I say that that's something I strongly encourage. It is overwhelming at first. It definitely is overwhelming. And even after you've got a lot of experience, it can still be a bit of time before you've figured out exactly what's happening in the workflow. One thing I find useful when analyzing workflows is to change the way that the links are rendered. So we've got the link render mode. We can go back to spline and we get those ugly nodes. But that sometimes tells us what's happening a little bit more easily, so we can actually follow the individual chains a little bit better. And something else that can be useful is just clicking on one of the nodes or one of the buttons there that can tell you exactly where things are connected, or it will give you an indication of what connects to where. But working with lots of these models and completing this course will give you the strength you need, the knowledge you need to be able to construct something like this, maybe even something better than this.